When large jobs require moving massive amounts of snow, get the work done quickly and efficiently with the Western Pile Driver and all-new Pile Driver XL pusher plows, both featuring Trace Edge technology. These pushers scrape down to the pavement with an advanced cutting-edge system that has independent 2-foot sections that move vertically, oscillate, and trip. Get more jobs done faster with the Western Pile Driver lineup of pusher plows.
Mike Bott from Frost Solutions, one of the owners of the company. What we do is provide a mini weather station to give you a tailored forecast to those particular locations so you know where and when and what to do in those parts of town. You know there's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different ways that people can experience tremendous value having a technology like this.
Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Journey with your host, Dave Westcott. The Entrepreneurial Journey is a weekly podcast that streams live every Tuesday at 9:15 a.m. Pacific on Dave's YouTube channel and LinkedIn profile. Now here's Dave with this week's episode.
Good morning and welcome to the Entrepreneurial Journey. I'm your host, Dave Westcott, and today we are talking about snow, one of my favorite topics. And upcoming is the Snow and Ice Management Annual Symposium, and that is going to be held in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at the end of June. And so we've dedicated a series to that called The Road to SIMA, and we are going to be focusing on snow-specific issues. And on those issues, in those conversations, we are going to lead you to SIMA. What does it mean to be a participant? What does it mean to be in the snow and ice industry? What are some best practices around slip and falls and pricing and customer interactions? And what does equipment look like from what we believe is top-line equipment from Western Pile Driver to Frost cameras, giving us insights and technology and responsiveness and everything that it means to really utilize the Frost weather system and the Western snowplow equipment, which we will be talking about in our podcast show. I've got with me co-host Todd Chapman this morning. Good morning, Todd Chapman. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm wearing my trans blue shirt, so I couldn't be doing any better.
Let's rock.
There's nothing better than wearing trans blue gear.
I know I need to get today. I'm not sporting the brand today, but
where's the lapel pin at?
And so I need to get that back on the docket. The thing is, I have I need to get 3 because I have 3 sport coats that I kind of roll through. Don't judge. I mean that's the limitation there, but I have it on 1, and so I think I need to get maybe a couple more.
All right, you need to get your trans blue rolling. You need to get your marketing on. You need to get your little trans blue.
But I do rock my my collared trans blue shirts quite a bit.
Yeah, you do. You do a nice job.
Yeah.
You'll
have to rep. You have to rep today.
Hey man, I'm repping every day. I'm all about the trans blue. Today's topic is really exciting. It's one of my favorite topics. Being in the snow and ice industry, I think that one of the biggest things that I think contractors and providers, so contractors and clients, if you will, we'll just use an example, Home Depot. I don't work for Home Depot, so there's nothing here with Home Depot. I don't have anything good or bad to say about Home Depot. But as Home Depot, everybody knows the name. Yep. So Home Depot is a purchaser of services. People go into a Home Depot during inclement weather. They're either safe or they're not. Mm-hmm. That can relate to a slip and fall. The contractor who's plowing the snow is either going to be held responsible for the slip and fall or not. And I think those are two of the stakeholders here. And then the third is the patron of the location who's walking in and potentially slipping and falling. So the stakeholders that we've got is store or buyer.
Client, yeah, whatever.
Store, buyer, client, depending on what side
where you are. That's right.
Spectrum you are on. Patron of the store, and then contractor providing services to the store. Slip and falls. In 2009, the Labor of Industry said that slip and falls were the second leading cause of accidental death in the United States. That's all slips, trips, and falls, right? That's not just on snow and ice.
Yep.
That can be, in the grocery store, you slip on something or you trip down a leading stairs. But it has a big impact on every single person today, right? Like it has a huge impact in our industry.
Yeah. I think the CDC says it's 800,000 hospitalizations from fall injuries every year. Yeah, it's almost 1 million people, which is mind blowing. I think it's $34 billion every year in hospital costs, amounting, right? I mean,
that's a lot of change.
That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money.
Yes. What do you think? I mean, obviously in the business of snow removal, and you've been out there for 20 years, Dave, we know it's about risk management, right? As you mentioned, I mean, the risks are, $34 billion, right? I mean, that's a ton of money that as the buyer, the contractor, obviously the stakeholders, those two main stakeholders are going to be held responsible. Obviously the patron's not going to be held responsible. In those buckets, what areas do they need to be thinking about to prevent those slip and falls, to prevent that? I know 'cause when you're looking at those, main two stakeholders, I would say is the contractors and that client's buyer store. Obviously we're coming into, obviously right now in this year, it's kind of, summertime and, a lot of people aren't thinking about snow, but we know it's coming and it's a big part of our business. But what areas do you think? When does the planning start for those people?
I don't think the planning should ever stop. I think that we should be planning all year round. I think it's absolutely critical. For the client, I think what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to assess liability, right? And I'm trying to maneuver that liability. So if I'm the client, if I'm the Home Depot of the world, right? What I want to do is I want to hire a contractor and I want them to be 100% responsible for any slip and fall. Right? So I want to put that into the contractual language. Now, you look at the contractor, and the contractor has to say, wait a minute, I'm either going to be okay with that or I'm not. Mm-hmm. The average cost of a slip and fall is about $48,000 a year, last time I looked. I think that if I'm the contractor, I don't have a problem taking 100% liability for the slip and fall, as long as I can service on the frequencies that I choose. Like if you're telling me that I am 100% responsible for any slip and fall, then I might want to de-ice 2 times a day. Seriously, I might want to de-ice every time it's 32 degrees, just because I don't want any chance of a slip and fall.
Yeah.
Like, if we're using the analogy of the Home Depot, how many people visit a Home Depot each day? Right?
Yeah.
It's probably a lot of people, right? And so potentially when we look at that, how many people visit Home Depot each day? In 2023, the Home Depot carried out over 1.6 billion customer transactions worldwide. So my calculator on my iPhone won't go that high. It's at 1.6 billion. So it's a lot.
Yep.
1.6 billion transactions. So that is a lot of people coming in and out of that store. Mm-hmm. And I want to be able to service at the frequency that I want, and I don't want to be hassled over how much it cost. because you are telling me that I am your liability shield.
Yeah, you're responsible,
right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a key. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. What other types of protection? Because I think obviously, outside of the execution of service and frequency of the service,
Yeah.
as a contractor, what other protection, for our audience, how do I help protect myself in case of a slip and fall? I mean, what are some other measures that I need to consider that would help me protect my business, protect my team?
I think that I want to take it to partnership, right? Because I think that, in the sales portion of the business, the idea of the slip and fall should be discussed,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the ideal customer is probably not one that says, I want you to bear all risk. Let's just use the Home Depot as an example, because what they probably do is they probably come in and they've got this really nasty contract. And it's probably got all sorts of penalties. I'm just guessing, but it's probably got all sorts of penalties and all sorts of, things that tell you, hey, you can't plow till it's 1 inch on the ground. And then you can't plow again until 2 inches have accumulated. And then you can de-ice, but you can't de-ice unless this threshold and this trigger and this are met. But by the way, you're 100% liable. And it doesn't matter if it's Home Depot or Lowe's or Target or Walmart or Wells Fargo or Bank of America or Chase or any of those customers, Walgreens, CVS, Amazon. They've all got really doctored up and lawyered contracts, right? And as that, they've got this idea that you're going to be responsible. But then they put a whole bunch of metrics in place that are there to reduce cost. Like if you want 100% slip and fall guarantee, then the site should be zero tolerance. I should be plowing at a skiff. I should be servicing at a skiff because I'm responsible. But contractors don't always look at it that way. And as long as contractors continue to work for brands that have those egregious contractual terms, then nothing changes in the industry, right? But the flip to that is that there are customers who you are able to have these real conversations with. And you're able to say, listen, I understand you want me to be 100% responsible for the slip and fall. And I'm going to take that responsibility, but that means that the site is zero tolerance. I'm plowing at a skiff of snow. I'm de-icing every time it hits 32 degrees. And some people might say, oh man, you're over servicing or this or that. But you can't tell what got spilled in the parking lot. You can't tell if there was maybe freezing fog or dew in the morning. In the West Coast, one of the things that we see is because we are right on the ocean, right? We are right on the water, right? The Puget Sound and everything, that layer of fog and dew comes in the morning. And I'll tell you what, you can look at a property and it can be 32 degrees or it can be 27 degrees and everything 5 miles away from the city can be bone dry. But everything between 5 miles and the shorefront are slicker than you can believe. Like, I mean, you can't even see it and you'll just come down, wham, you'll just fall. And, at the end of the day, you'll look at the weather report and it'll say, oh man, there was no moisture. Mm-hmm. And I actually talked to one of the largest weather companies in the world yesterday. And they said they don't track the Northwest.
Really?
The East Coast heavy, Midwest,
Midwest, okay.
Pacific Northwest is on demand. It's this, it's that. It's not. It's kind of a misconclusion. So you've got hundreds and thousands of locations and businesses that are kind of in peril there. And so I think as a client, we want to start asking some questions like, what kind of equipment do you use? What kind of de-icers are you putting down on the property? And I think as we're asking those questions, we're starting to talk about shared risk. And we're starting to say, listen, here's the expectation. If you want me to be responsible for the slip and fall, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have zero tolerance on the plowing. I'm not waiting for an inch or 2 inches to plow. That's unrealistic. Somebody's going to fall when it's in that threshold. I'm going to pre-treat before as we know snow is in the forecast. We're going to plow as soon as it's beginning to accumulate. We're going to de-ice after that. And then we're going to continue to plow on a zero tolerance basis. And we're going to continue to provide de-icer to that storm until it's done. And that's going to be expensive. But the flip to that is if there's any slip and fall, I'm bearing the cost. I'm happy to accept that cost. Now, I think that's a fair trade-off. And then that shared risk is kind of like saying, well, I don't think we want to spend that much money. I don't think we want to go that crazy. I think what we want to do is we want to say, like, hey, if there's snow in the forecast, you can pre-treat with de-icer. And we say, okay, great, we're going to pre-treat. And then, hey, we don't want you plowing until it's an inch. But so if snow accumulation is between 0 and 1 inch and somebody comes out and slips and falls, then that's no longer on us. That's going to be on you as the location. Are you good with that? And then they have to make a decision. And if they come back and say, hey, well, and then we don't want you to come out until 2 more inches have fallen, then you have to say, okay, well, between 1 and 2, if anybody slips and falls, again, we're not responsible for that. Mm-hmm. But it gets really tricky. And how do you report that?
Yep.
How do you monitor that? And that's where great solutions like frost cameras can come into play, where you've got a camera that's on site and you're monitoring the weather and you're monitoring the conditions and you're saying, okay, my plow truck went through here at 7:45 a.m. The lot was perfectly clean. The person fell at 8:45. At 8:45, their return accumulation was only 1 inch. But again, that's going to bear more cost.
Right. And especially in those areas in the Pacific Northwest, as you just mentioned, may not be tracked very well. So
right, everywhere from the Colorado Rockies to the West Coast is not tracked well. So Utah, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Washington, Oregon, Upper California, these are not heavily tracked areas. This is not really considered the snow belt. I'm not saying there's not data. I'm not saying you can't get certified snow totals. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying that in that process, it's not monitored as heavily as it is in the East Coast and the Midwest, where there is tons and tons of snow. Did that answer your question? And I know that was a long answer.
No, it did. And I think it from both sides of it, because I think it's that balance, because especially in the majority of the contractors out there, obviously there's some large players that are going to have a ton of equipment, huge service area, and the ability, and obviously may even have general counsels, right, that represent them, and can give them confidence that, hey, if there's an issue, I'm protected. But a good majority of those, it's a very fragmented industry. A good chunk of lower, maybe in that range. And so, like, hey, what's and everyone wants to go after those big fish, like on Home Depot or a Lowe's, or big box stores or retail. And it's like, hey, how do I protect myself? And in some ways, I think sometimes they just get so excited about working in that opportunity, they may not even think about the risk or think about the liability there. So I think those are some great tips of obviously working, negotiating if it's at all possible for them, obviously to negotiate that and protect themselves, because $48,000, right, give or take.
Yep.
That's a good chunk for some of these smaller businesses and even some medium-sized businesses, right? So just how do they measure that risk? As far as planning goes, I know it's a never-ending process, but we are in a seasonal business, right? Talked a little bit about just those kind of ebbs and flows in the year, because I think you're always planning, but in what areas right now? As we're coming out of the winter and heading into the summer, but it's never ending. What can I do as a client? What should I be doing if I'm a facility manager, property manager, and then as a contractor? What are some of those post-season kind of summertime activities that I should be working on and thinking about, and taking advantage of, right now?
That's a great question. I think as a client, as a client, your time is valuable, right? Because as a facility manager or property manager, you got a million things going on. I think that I want to understand equipment allocation. So if I'm a customer, what's really important to me is the allocation of equipment and the equipment that you own. So there's a lot of great equipment out there on the market today. I'm a huge fan of the Western equipment. I love Western, which is made by Douglas Dynamics. Douglas Dynamics makes Western, Fisher, and SnowX. I love this equipment. I love it because it's made in the USA, right? So I'm a big proponent of supporting the United States and what that looks like. But I also want the best equipment for my truck. And I'll give you an example. If I was to put a pusher box on a skid steer for a Home Depot, because that's kind of the analogy that we've been using here today, and I was to put a pile driver with a live trace edge on that pusher box, then what would happen is that pavement has contours to it. It's not perfectly level. Like this table we know is perfectly flat. It's perfectly level. But if we were to put that same sheet of asphalt next to it, it's going to have little divots, little potholes, little cracks, little inconsistencies, right? It's not poured perfectly straight. And what happens is if I was to use a pusher box that was just a straight, non-articulating blade, then I would leave snow and ice in those divots, right? And so those actually become pockets where people can slip and fall. So I may have plowed it clean, I may have scraped it clean, but there may be a residue of snow and ice that's left over on the parking lot. And what happens is that is a potential for a slip and fall, because what am I waiting for? I'm waiting to plow it, and then I'm waiting for my de-icer truck to come by and put down the product and then melt it off and keep it safe. But when I use something like the pile driver from Western, which I love, it's a very heavy piece of equipment, and it has that live trace edge. So that means that the blades are moving up and down. They're articulating, right? And that's picking up that snow, and that's giving me a perfectly clean pushing surface. As a facility manager, that's something that should be important to me. Like if I'm thinking of my, checklist manifesto, I'm thinking about my pilot's checklist, my building checklist, what kind of equipment do you have? How are you embracing that? And then the other thing that I'm thinking about is the environmental impact. Like I think we should all be thinking environmental impact. We should be thinking of what salt does to our streams and lakes, what de-icer does to our streams and lakes. Like, you look at the storm drains in the Pacific Northwest, and this stuff drains right into the Puget Sound.
Yep. Really cool.
So, if I use a product like the pile driver and I get that completely clean, guess what is less of? There's less snow and ice residue, which means I can put down less product. So if I can put down 30% less product but get the same results, two things happen. One, I can give you a less expensive service cost because my equipment is top notch. Two, I can be more competitive to get more business in my market space. And three, I keep your lot clearer and I keep it safer for the potential, patron who's coming in. So if I'm the facility manager, I'm really concerned with the type of equipment that's being used on my parking lot. I'm concerned with the age of the equipment on my parking lot. And then I also want to know the crews. Do you have enough crews to service my work? Am I going to be, calling you and beating down your phone, and you said you were going to be here at 7:00 in the morning and it's 2 and nobody has showed up? What's going on? Where are you idiots at? Like we don't want to deal with that. So it's just understanding how many sites can you service per hour? Where am I at on the route? What time do I have to be there to get service? So on and so forth. And those are the things I want to understand as a client. From the contractor side, what I want to understand and prepare for is, what is my production rate? So like if I'm using Western MVP, front mounted snowplow, or, the Western, whiteout commercial grade contractor, we love the Western products.
Yep.
But if we're using that, what's the production rate of those pieces of equipment? Is it 50,000 square feet an hour? Is it 70,000 square feet an hour? What is that production rate look like? Because that tells me, like, if I've got a Bank of America, and Bank of America is not a client, I'm just using them as an example, nothing good or bad, just an example. But if I know that parking lot is 20,000 square feet, then I know that if I'm producing 50,000 square feet an hour with a truck, I know that I should be able to be in and out of there in 15, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, plowing. And then that truck should have a de-icer unit on the back. And then what kind of productivity? If I have a hopper that's filled with salt, that's going to make my driver more productive. Why? My driver doesn't have to get out. He doesn't have to load bags into the back of a tailgate spreader. He doesn't have to risk slipping and falling. He doesn't have to get cold. He doesn't have to risk cutting himself on a box knife or leaving the lid off and it flying away in some storm or whatever. Like, it just makes it more efficient. So he can plow and then he can drive through, de-ice, and he can go. And so I'm thinking about productivity. And then, okay, if I feel like, okay, let's just say he's out of there in 30 minutes by the time he de-ices, and he's got, windshield time is obviously important. So if that's limited to 10 minutes between sites, that means that, I can almost service 2 sites an hour. So how many can go on his route before he needs to cycle back through? And that's going to be dependent on the type of storm that we're facing. Yep. So we should have strategic plans built out for blizzard conditions where that driver can only, maybe handle 4 to 6 locations and then has to circle back through versus, a mid-level storm that's going to get 3 to 5 inches. Maybe he can handle 6 to 8 locations versus hey, we got 2 inches of snow. It started at 8 o'clock at night. It was done by midnight. I've got 9 hours to clean it up, or I put 10 to 12 locations on his route. Yep. And so I want to really build out those plans that are going to make my driver really, really consistent when it comes to the type of storm. And so I want to use tools. I want to use things like frost, right? Because frost is awesome, because if I use a frost camera, I can see real time what's going on the site.
Real data. Yeah.
What's happening? Data. What does it look like? Because the weather data might not be matching what's happening. So if I'm using great products and suppliers like Western and Frost, and I'm using them to manage my business, and then I've got a great weather tool like maybe WeatherWorks or AccuWeather or NOAA, maybe I'm using one of those 3 weather mediums to monitor the weather and monitor the conditions, and then look at what the storm is forecasted to do. Well, it's going to start snowing at 9 p.m. and then it's going to end at 7 a.m. Trying to manage the storm in that way. That's how I'm planning to put those things in place. But as a contractor, I want the best equipment. I want the equipment that's going to give me the best production rate through the storm, right? And so that's really the way that I'm looking at it. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. Can you, just on the topic of just to kind of wrap it up and land it. I mean, we love the experience shares here. Can you provide, whether it's a best practice, a case study, or an experience that has involved a slip and fall, whether it's a case of your own or others you've listened to, or heard, that would be valuable for the listeners in preparation and just, kind of, hey, just a live share experience?
I think,
and the importance of all this,
maybe, yeah. I'll share kind of a couple scenarios. I think, one, I'll share one of my first slip and falls I ever got. I was working for a large, big box brand, and I got a slip and fall, and so guy falls in a parking lot, and we get this claim tendered to us by some third-party risk management company, and they're like, "Hey, you had a slip and fall on the property," and so we're going. Excuse me, we're going back to the cameras, we're going back to the store. And what we find is that at the time of the slip and fall, when he fell, he said, "Oh, I damaged my right arm," was in the initial report. And then the second report at the doctor's office was, "I damaged my left arm." whoops, touched the microphone top there, damaged my left arm. So we had inconsistencies, okay, across those two issues. And then what we found was that our team had actually de-iced the parking lot about 30 minutes prior to the actual slip and fall happening. Okay, then time goes on. We're investigating this. We're fighting this. And what happens is that big box chain that we were working for, because of the slip and fall, decided that they were going to hold all payments. And we had, 10 or 12 locations with them at the time, but they were going to hold all payments for all services until we fixed this. And that was horrible for us, because at the time, I want to say they owed us around $100,000. So $100,000 for a small business is it's crippling. We're trying to make payroll. We're trying to buy de-icer. We're trying to put fuel in trucks. Excuse me. And now they're holding payment. And so now we're trying to settle this thing. And the truth of the matter is that we're not even in the wrong. So we have our lawyer, great lawyer down in Edmonds. Shout out to Rick Werdeman. He did a great job for us. But as we dive into this thing, as it continues to go on, the guy ends up in prison. And the guy's in prison for fraud.
Oh, wow.
Now, it comes out that this guy has done fraudulent activities like this in the past. So he's in prison. So now, to settle this, we got to get with him. We got to get with his lawyer. His lawyer's got to have a conversation with him in prison. And that's going back and forth and happening. And we've got all this money on the line. And it's this battle, right? And so what did we do? We ended up, he said, I want $10,000. I'm not going away for less than $10,000. And so that's where we started from. And, Rick's negotiating with his lawyer, and we're pointing out you did this, and you lied about this arm and that arm, and this is what's going on. But we need our money. We need our money because we got to make payroll.
Yeah.
Right? We got to pay the guys who service the parking lots, but it's killing us. So we negotiate. Probably a couple of weeks go by, maybe even a month. And finally, we end up settling for, a couple $1,000. And so now we got to send the money, and it's got to go to his mom, and then his mom's got to receive it, and she's got to sign a waiver. And now, we got to get this thing released. And so the point is that even a fake slip and fall claim, even a slip and fall claim that's been documented and, is bad and is not going well and all of that, and the guy's a fraud, and the guy's been in prison, and the guy's currently in prison, it's still, it's going to cost a couple $1,000. And I want to say we paid out $2,500 or $2,000, something like that, to get it done. But the killer was we paid out $7,000 or $8,000 in legal fees. So by the end of it, we still ended up paying out $10,000.
Wow.
And you could say, well, why didn't you just tender it to your insurance company? And the thing is that insurance is great, but every time you get one of these slip and falls, bam, it skyrockets the costs, right? Mm-hmm. The costs go through the roof. And so we don't want our insurance canceled. We don't want the premiums to go up. I don't know. In my mind, insurance is one of the biggest scams. They want to help you, but then they don't want to help you every time there's a problem.
That's a whole other podcast, right?
That is, right? They want to fight you on everything. They want to deny everything. So we've had this mentality, this methodology that we don't tender it to insurance. We're going to try to fight it. We're going to try to fight the slip and falls as they come in. And that's been our best practice. But the lesson to anybody listening, the lesson to anybody building a snow business or working in snow and ice management is even if it's a false claim, it still has a great risk and great expense to your company. Now, what about the $10,000 that you spent? And then what about the time that I spent as an owner messing around with this, and that my staff spent messing around with this? There was probably easily $10,000 of labor just spent in our team getting documentation, looking at things, probably worrying about things, whatever it might be. And now we've still got to settle this. And then we lost money by not getting our money because we had to get these releases signed. We had to prove that this was paid. And then the company released payment. And then the lesson there was, hey, never work for these big box stores that can tie up your cash over one slip and fall, because they're worried that you're not going to take care of it. So now you got to have more contract review. You need to have more lawyers in place. You need to have more things that cost more money to do the job adequately. Yeah. And so slip and falls play a huge role in running the business. But at the end of the day, think about where the customer is at. The customer has to mitigate these slip and falls.
Yep.
And why is snow removal even something that happens? It's because there is stores, and people need the client, the store, the Best Buy or the Home Depot or the whatever, the Bank of America. They need people to get into their stores to buy their products.
They need to drive revenue.
Yep. So they decide it's worth it to pay X amount of dollars to clear a parking lot so that their people can get into the store.
And get into the store safely.
That's right. As safely as possible. And so you want to have a robust slip and fall plan. Don't think of it as snow removal. Think of it as risk removal. You really want to think about how you remove that from your business. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's a great call. Just a couple of the takeaways, for listeners. And as we were talking about it, one is shared risk partnership, right?
Yep.
Really discuss and work together on the client and contractor. Great equipment, shout out, for us on Western, Douglas Dynamics, Frost. There's great partners out there, great reporting, great data. And then, for the equipment side, and then planning and scheduling, and then obviously having a great risk management plan based on the events and coming together. So great call.
And it comes down to doing what's best for your business.
Yeah. That's right.
Right.
Yeah. Different sizes.
Like the risk is out there.
Yep.
The danger is out there. And so what you really want to do is you really want to take hold of that. And at TransBlue, what we really try to do is we really try to manage the risk, and we try to make it fair, not only for us, but for the customer and for the patron, right? So for our client, the patron, and our team, we try to do that. We work hard to negotiate those terms. We've learned a lot of lessons along the way. It's why we utilize Western snowplows and Western pile drivers, because they do help us get to where we need to go. It's the reason why we utilized Frost cameras so we can see real-time conditions. So we're using equipment and technology. It's why we have in-house general counsel so that we can look at contracts, review them. And then it's also why our sales team is being very strategic in who they're targeting. So we don't want to work with the companies that are going to bury us in contractual paperwork. We want to be selective about our clientele and our client type so that it's a good, fair relationship for all of us. So I think you want to look at those 4 or 5 things and then have your plan built out from there. And that's what's going to lead you to success. That's what's going to really drive a winning solution for your business.
It's awesome. Love it.
Thank you.
Great call.
It was a great call. Any final thoughts on your end as we bring this thing in?
I would just say, obviously, for those, the audience, that are watching, just understanding right now, as you're coming fresh off of a season and really analyzing that, hey, like where would we fall? Where would we succeed coming out of the season, and thinking about that in relation to slip and falls. Like, hey, I don't know where they were, in your business, but having a good plan, right? Starting with that strategy and assessing, and then, hey, what are my equipment needs? Where can I grow? And then target the right customers that fit who I am. So yeah, good stuff overall.
I love it. I'm Dave Westcott. If you like this, give us a like, give us a share. Follow me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube, Instagram. Drop your comments in the comment box. Give us a like, give us a share. We'd love any feedback. And if you're a snow expert and you'd love to share about a topic, we'd love to have you on the show. Drop me a DM, and we'd love to see what you can contribute to our show here. The Entrepreneurial Journey has been a lot of fun this morning. Thanks, Todd.
Awesome. Thank you.
We'll see you next week.
See you guys.
Mike Bott from Frost Solutions, one of the owners of the company. What we do is provide a mini weather station to give you a tailored forecast to those particular locations, so you know where and when and what to do in those parts of town. You know, there's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different ways that people can experience tremendous value having a technology like this.
Introducing the all-new Western Enforcer V-Plow. Engineered with all the features, efficiency, and performance of full-size Western V-Plows, built specifically for your half-ton truck. For more information, visit westernplows.com.